Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our 12th COVID-19 service. And I, in tongue-in-cheek, would say it's good to see you, although only you can see me. So, welcome to this morning's service. This could be our last service. We're looking at starting again on the 21st, which will be Sunday week, because on the 19th they're making it possible for 75 people to be able to meet in a single room. So we're looking at meeting in the hall, where we can have up to 40 people in the hall. So I'm thinking this will be our last one done this way. But I'm going to hand over to Colin, who will lead us in some notices. Thank you, Colin.
Hey, it's very exciting, isn't it? Look, here's the latest piece of paper. We're up to Step 2 Plus. Step 2 Plus, and it looks like, yes, we'll be able to start next week. We'll confirm that with email for you through the week, that it'll be happening or not. And so be looking for that, and I'll probably put it on the website too if I can remember. Hey, I was just a little thought that I had. I'm tripping over my words tonight, even worse than usual. I went out to a birthday party through the week, and after the party, half a dozen of us were standing around talking, and we were talking about the COVID Safe app. There was 6 of us there, and 1 of us was using it. 5 weren't. Everybody had thought about it, and all of you will have thought about it too. Now, should I use this or shouldn't I? What's the considerations you've had? Most understood why we should use it, how useful it could be in contact tracing. Most of us understood the technical explanations of how we're told that it works, but 5 out of 6 people didn't use it. There was a basic problem that everybody had. They were suspicious. Suspicious. Trust was an issue. Could we trust the government? We've been told things before. Politicians, bureaucrats, unfortunately, they don't rate that highly these days on the trust scale. The very next morning, I was reading in Psalm 22. And Psalm 22, sorry, not Psalm 22, it's Proverbs 22. I've got the wrong note here. And Proverbs 22 verse 1 says, "A good name is more desirable than riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold." Many a politician would love a good name, but unfortunately something's happened. Not as respected as perhaps as they could be. Oh, that they'd never been at that party. Oh, that they could erase that Facebook post. Oh, that they could take back a foolish word, something that they'd said that caused them a lot of grief. To us, a good name is more desirable than riches. To us as Christians, a good name is more desirable than riches. We need a name. We need to be somebody who is known, that we look like Jesus, we smell like Jesus, we act like Jesus. We would want to be ones that people could look at and say, I can trust that person. They're following Jesus. Just a thought for you. Hey, no birthdays this week, Karen tells me, no birthdays. But just a couple of missions things. Now, you would have all seen last week the good news from the government, matched grant fund, that they're going to give us. If you put in, I think to get the maximum, it sounded as though from reading their thing that if you put in $150, they would put in $1,500, making a total of $1,650. And if you did it yourself through the website, you can get a receipt back and you can claim it on your tax as well. So pretty good. That's you can't give that way normally. So that's just for the month of June. So it needs to be done. You can do it through the Baptist World Aid website. If you go there, you can find it easy. I'll put in the email, which you've probably received by the time you get this, a newsletter from Chris Eglinton, and another one for those of you that remember Reese and Rhonda Hall. If you came to a meeting at Alison and my place back a year and a half ago, from, at the moment they're in northern Uganda because they can't get into South Sudan safely. It's still quite dangerous there. But their newsletter will be there too. And I think that we can hand over. So we've got a special speaker. Peter Lindquist's coming to read the scriptures to us. And I'll let him introduce it. Thanks, Peter.
Reading from 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 to 5. To the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder and a witness of Christ's sufferings, who also will share in the glory to be revealed. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. In the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. All of you, clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favour to the humble.
Thank you, Peter. It's interesting that Colin was talking about our leaders and how having a good name is far more important than having any form of riches. And I find it interesting looking at our world leaders and how they have led their countries through this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, my assumptions in regards to leaders is that they have good advisors, and together with that assumption is another assumption that they follow their advice of their good advisors. Now, advisors can get it wrong, but the medical advice in regards to COVID-19 has been quite, reasonably consistent. Australia, I think, has had a small time advantage in being able to see what has happened elsewhere before it may have happened in Australia. Now, I think we've still made mistakes, but it seems to me that Scott Morrison and Stephen Marshall have led us well through this pandemic. Other leaders have not done so well. Donald Trump has said some things, to put it mildly, have been unhelpful. Brazil's leader doesn't believe in social distancing, and so it seems that both America and Brazil are paying an awful price. The human race needs leaders. Even more importantly, we need good leaders. God's church needs leaders, and we need good, godly leaders. And in our passage this morning, Peter gives 3 characteristics of good, godly leaders. Now, before we go into these 3 characteristics, Peter begins by saying that he too is an elder. He is not just laying something on elders that he doesn't have to adhere to himself. Peter has also witnessed the sufferings of Christ, as did some of the elders. And just like them, he too will share in the glory that is coming. So Peter is not setting himself up as some sort of guru who doesn't know what he's talking about. Peter is not saying, do as I do, not as I say. Or should I say, he's not saying, do as I say, not as I do. Peter is not being theoretical. He's passing on what he has learnt through the refining fires of life. As elders, they are to be shepherds of God's flock. Now, shepherds were an important part of Israel's life. Shepherds cared for the flocks that were under their care, the sheep that were under their care. What the flock needed in terms of water, food, shelter, protection from enemies, shearing, etc. the shepherds were in charge of making sure that they got what they needed. The shepherd would lead the flock to water, food and protection on a 24/7 basis. As shepherds cared for the flocks, so Israel's leaders needed to care for the Israelite people, and church elders need to care for God's people. Peter goes on and then gives 3 specific principles of how we are to do that and how we are not to do that. Firstly, Peter says, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you. Serving as an elder in God's church needs to be done with the proper motive. A church elder needs to serve willingly, not because they have to, and so they just grudgingly go about doing the job. Church eldership, and in fact I think this applies to any church leadership in any area really, needs to be seen as a calling from God and therefore done willingly and received willingly. Now that doesn't make it easy, but there's nothing worse for God's people than for the elders of the church or God's elders in the church to rather be doing anything else than being an elder. 38 years ago, I struggled receiving God's call on my life. I wanted to know what God wanted me to do, and I wanted to do it. But I didn't want to hear or receive what he was trying to say to me. After a 2-year struggle, I gave in and headed down the road to become a Baptist minister. Since then, there have been 2 times when I have tried to escape or get out of being a Baptist minister. And there were 2 times when God gently but firmly called me back. And so that wasn't something that I begrudgingly received, but I willingly received that call. I enjoy being your pastor and part of the eldership team. It's not always been easy. There have been times when my introvert nature has wanted to just escape and get out of any particular situation. But I'm still here. And one of the reasons that I'm still here is because you have at times confirmed God's calling on my life. Another reason has been because God himself has confirmed his calling upon my life. And the last reason is because I am willing. Now, the last aspect of this first principle that I wish to highlight is that elders need to know God and what he would have them do. The knowledge of God and knowing him better is a crucial part of being an elder and therefore willingly doing the ministry, the calling of an elder. The second principle Peter gives is where it says, not for shameful gain, but eagerly. Another way of saying that, which will bring out what the intention of the Greek is, not greedy for money, but eagerly serving. Now it seems that elders in Peter's day were giving financial remuneration. And so there was a danger that they may do the job or fulfill the calling or fulfill the role of an elder for the money. Now the Bible has quite a lot to say about money. Money is used to pay someone so that for the work that they've done, so that then they can buy the food or the clothing or the shelter that they need so as to live. But people can grow to love money. They can be greedy for money. And if an elder becomes like that, then they can't be a shepherd of God's flock because they no longer serve the people, they're there for themselves. Now there's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with having lots of money, or there's nothing wrong with having too little money for that matter. Money is merely a means of getting what we need so as to live. But we cannot serve God and money. If an elder or a pastor of a church loves money, then they do it for the money, and then they're not doing it eagerly. And so they either ought to need to change their hearts, or they need to be stood down. The third principle Peter gives is that elders should not dominate people. Rather, they should be an example to the flock. In Mark 10, both James and John, and I think it's in Luke, their mum has a part to play in this as well, but they go and ask Jesus and ask if one of them could be on his left or right, depending on where you're looking at me, or one on his left. They were asking for positions of authority where they could rule with political and military power over people when Jesus became king. They still had the belief that Jesus would defeat the Romans and rule Israel like King David did. Jesus replied to all of his disciples in Mark 10 and verses 40 to 45, which I will just read out to you. Jesus said, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so with you. But whoever should be great among you must be your servant, and whoever should be first among you must be the slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom for many." Jesus came to set up his kingdom, but not as an earthly kingdom. The church is in his kingdom and is to be ruled or led in his way. That means that elders and pastors are to shepherd the people, but not with earthly authority. If elders desire power and authority over people, then they cannot be an elder. Elders are there to serve, not to dominate. So elders are to willingly serve, not greedy for money, and not to be a powermonger. We are encouraged to be like that because it says, "When the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory." That's in verse 4. To put that another way, when Jesus returns, they will receive the promised unfading crown of glory. But what is that? What is the unfading crown of glory? Let me read to you 4 scripture passages. Firstly, 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 to 4. "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you." And then 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 25. "Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable." Then James 1 and verse 12. "Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has withstood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him." And the last one from Revelation 3 and verse 11. "I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown." What is this unfading crown of glory? It is none other than the fulfillment of the hope that we have. It is eternal life. It is none other than what Jesus has won for us on the cross with his death and resurrection. It is restoration of our relationship with God that we enjoy today, and the fulfillment of that relationship when either Jesus returns or we die and go to be with him, go to be with God in heaven. This crown of glory is not a reward for services given. It is a promise given to us by God. As a God-given promise, it is a part of the hope that we have. In talking to elders, Peter is reminding them of this promise as an encouragement for them to continue to serve God and his church as an elder. Does this mean that elders will receive something better than anyone else? No. Each one of us has received a gift from God. No gift is better than anything else. The gift of an eldership is no better than the gift of someone who serves by cleaning, for that matter. No gift is better than any other. And so as an encouragement for you to use and continue to use your gift, let me remind you too that you too will receive the unfading crown of glory. In verses 1 to 4 of our passage this morning, Peter is talking to elders. Then in the first part of verse 5, Peter stops talking to elders and talks to those who he calls the younger. Now the younger are understood to be those who are under the authority of the elders, and this would include men and women, irrespective of what age they are. So let me ask you a question. Is submission a problem to you? Now before you answer that question, let me ask it in a better way. If Salem's leadership, especially the elders, led in the ways that Peter is encouraging them to in our passage this morning, would submission be a problem? Now I hope and trust that the answer would be no. But, knowing a fallen human nature, there are people who won't submit to any authority, no matter how godly the leaders are. And as we look at verse 5, the first thing we need to understand, though, is what submission is. Submission is not jumping then asking how high on the way up. Submission doesn't take away responsibility either. We are still responsible for our actions. Submission is never blind. Submission is firstly to God, who is never wrong. And our submission is secondly to God as we submit to the people that God has chosen to be our elders, our leaders. If people are not prepared to submit to the leadership of the church, then the first aspect that I think needs to be looked at is the leadership of the church. Is the leadership godly? How does it stack up looking at these three things that Peter has mentioned? How does it compare to Jesus' leadership? And the reason I put that as the first aspect is because I think that is an aspect of humility, and the leaders being in submission as well. But the second aspect that needs to be looked at is at the people themselves. The other thing that we need to understand is that an elder is not necessarily someone who is old. The term elder refers to a role, to a calling from God to be a leader. You don't have to be someone over a certain arbitrary age to be an elder. An elder is someone who loves God. They are called and gifted to lead. They are mature in the faith, and they are recognised by the church, the wider church, to be leaders. Generally, that means they will be older rather than younger. But age does not determine whether they are elders or not. Likewise, younger, as in verse 5, is not defined by some arbitrary age. Generally, they would most likely be younger in age and may include the younger learning leaders, or those who are coming up leaders. The call is that the younger men learn from those who are older, and more experience. The end result is that the church will benefit from that shared learning. The second half of verse 5, Peter changes again and talks to everyone, whether you are a leader or a follower. What is arguably the best trait that we can have as either a leader or a follower? I suggest to you that it is humility. As you read the New Testament, what stands out for you as the greatest example of humility that you have read or that you can remember? Let me read to you from John chapter 13 and verses 3 to 5. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come to God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer garment, and wrapped the towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began washing the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Jesus had the power of God. Men are powerless compared to God, yet Jesus did the humblest thing that he could do. He washed the disciples' feet. Having humility means that we will be prepared to do anything, even learning from each other, even submitting to one another. Think about the example of Jesus in regards to church leadership. If church leaders are not prepared to humbly serve, if church leaders want to dominate, if church leaders are not prepared to listen, learn and evaluate every situation, then they should not be a leader. If church leadership is exercised in the way that Peter here describes, who wouldn't be prepared to be humble and submit? Only those who are too proud to be humble. Why be humble? What does the scripture say to us this morning? God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Would you ever want God to oppose you? If we don't, and I assume that no one wants God to oppose them, then we need to develop humility. We develop humility when we follow Jesus. Humility is encouraged as we cast our anxieties on him because he cares for us. Humility is not weakness. It is the strength of God in us. We have nothing to fear, so we can exercise humility towards one another. One of the major themes in 1Peter is suffering in the midst of persecution. As we experience this today, even if it is very different from the ways that we would have experienced it back in Peter's day, we need good, godly church leaders. And we need to have good, godly church followers. May we always humbly follow our God as we serve him, as we serve one another, whether that be as a leader or as a follower. Amen. Let me close in a prayer. Father God, we thank you that the greatest leader we have is you. And we thank you that you give your church, Salem Baptist Church, your church around this nation and around our world, you give your church elders, leaders. And we pray that as our elders' elder, may they humbly follow you. And as we follow our elders, may that be in humility as we follow you through them. Amen.